Salam Sejahtera, everybody. This is Michael Teo here, and personally, all the way from Washington, D.C., America, I'd like to welcome all of you to the BQE Youth Entrepreneurship Summit. Well, throughout my world expedition this year, where I've traveled to more than 20 other countries, volunteering in humanitarian development projects and environmental conservation projects, one thing stood out to me. That is, change is inevitable. And now you have actually a choice being in the summit. Are you going to make use of the summit to network, to get to know the fellow entrepreneurs, the inspiring figures that have been lined up by the organizers to pursue your ambition, to pursue your dream, to contribute back to your communities and in general for Malaysia? Or you can be hesitant towards this change movement and be irrelevant, be left behind. And this is essentially true, especially when I've traveled to these countries from as diverse as Africa to Latin America, where I do not speak a word of Spanish, to the very developed countries like Switzerland, Germany, the US, Canada, Australia, to name a few. This year has been a really eye-opening year for me. But one thing I did see throughout my world travels this year, that is the sheer entrepreneurial spirit exhibited by the young people, by the NGOs, by the public sectors, and by the corporate entities in these different countries. Now, I'm very honored to join all of you here to share with you my little insight of my world expedition. But before that, please do allow me to take you back a few months ago, or now maybe 11 months ago, when I first started my global expedition. Last year, the UK, through a company called Smaller Earth, launched the world's largest social entrepreneurship and global citizenship competition called Your Big Year. In its inaugural year, there were 45,000 people from 168 countries that participated. And for sure, I joined in the competition as well, without much expectations, because during that time, I was also one of the youngest and also the only ASEAN participant to have been picked or to have qualified from the 45,000 people to the 24 finalists to Liverpool last November, last year. And what happened was, when we were in Liverpool, we had to consult government agencies, work with charitable organizations, NGOs, work on projects to actually raise funds, get more people to volunteer, or get more people to do good to their society. And like they said, you never know. A Malaysian was elected, was voted in by a live audience and an audience watching online to be the world's first global ambassador for Your Big Year. But when I embarked on this journey, even though it's an all-expense paid-for trip around the world, I did not take it as a prize. It was an opportunity for me. An opportunity for me to share our Malaysian culture, our Malaysian best practices, the proud moments that we as a nation, we as its young people have actually cherished together with the rest of the world. But more importantly, it was for me to give back to Malaysia by actually learning, by actually seeing how things are done in each of these different countries. So I've traveled to more than 20 other countries now. I'm currently in Washington, D.C., advocating that youth volunteerism be recognized, be incentivized further, and be pushed. But one thing I did discover, from volunteering at the same time, I've seen entrepreneurial spirit flourishing among the young people in the different countries I've been to. Now, to most of you who I assume are mostly students from the IPTA and IPTS, I must say that the entrepreneurial spirit is very important. People have always asked me, is it important to launch a business? Is it important to be a multimillionaire when you hit the age of 30? Pretty much, some of you will make it. Some of you, maybe you need to try a few more years ahead. But what happened is, this is my advice or suggestion to any of the youths who have approached me, and these are not limited to Malaysians. This year, I've spoken to many global conferences, and I've spoken to every single country I've been to in their local universities and forums. And most of the time, young people do come up to me and say, is social entrepreneurship the way? But not necessarily, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes I believe you can have that social entrepreneurial spirit. In a sense, you absorb, you learn, you gather all the information, the knowledge and the experiences of an effective entrepreneur. Being resourceful, being well connected, being confident with your ideas, being able to communicate, being able to convince, being able to rally support for your ideas are some of the traits I've personally witnessed throughout my world expedition this year. Now, most of these young people whom I've met throughout my world expedition may not have been the entrepreneurs, but they are hired to be managers, to be project coordinators, to be project initiators for NGOs and charitable bodies back in their countries, as far away as Colombia, to South Africa, to even Zimbabwe, where young people like yourself are engaged to share ideas to impact their society. But once again, these young talents who have all become my friends now got to where they are today because they had that entrepreneurial spirit. What I may recommend is basically read up a lot on entrepreneurial pursuits done by renowned people. More recently, of course, the late Steve Jobs. Of course, their stories are inspirational. Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, even the late Tan Sri Lim Gautong, even Dr. Mahathir, who I believe has been really inspirational and entrepreneurial in steering Malaysia to the right direction. But learn about their traits and then absorb their traits and think how you could use them in the most practical term. Now, I've also been asked as well, throughout my world expedition this year, what have I done? Well, where should I start? I've been to 20 over countries, but in these 20 over countries, I did not win a prize. I did not win a holiday package, though it was nice to go all the way up to Machu Picchu, to look at the rising sun, and also to meditate at the top of the Sun Pyramid in the Aztec ancient ruins in Mexico. But of course, I married my holiday experiences of cultural exchange with volunteering physically. I've built wells in the desert mountains of Arequipa, Peru, which have provided clean water for 108 families. I was joined by the power of 800 young volunteers, just like yourself, in Bogota, Colombia, where we have constructed 500 houses and shelters for the hardcore poor families. Pretty much all these families which originally do not even have a place to sleep, and they even do not have a place to learn and to grow into. And now they do. I volunteered with animals where I participated in a rebreeding program for the lions in Kenya and in Zimbabwe. Pretty much you would think, how is this related to entrepreneurship? How is this related to economic activity? As I was in the lion program, I learned that the native people, like the Maasai people in Kenya, the native Aboriginal people that inhabit Zimbabwe, have basically used these lions, their natural heritage, as a source of economic income. They drive tourism into the safari zone. They basically become forest rangers. They become tour guides. They learn how to track the lions. All these are rather entrepreneurial spirit built in their ecosystem. For these people, they may not have access to Wi-Fi, the iPhone, or the internet like many of you who are now in the auditorium would be experiencing or enjoying right now. But at least these people were really blessed with their natural resources like the great safari and its wilds. So they used that to their advantage. So I was pretty much volunteering in those programs as well. Now, aside from volunteering, I've also believed in order to make my world expedition as the elected global ambassador, first of its kind from Malaysia for the world, I'm an advocacy for youth volunteerism and social entrepreneurship at the same time. Going to each of these different countries, I give speeches, I talk to young people, I talk to global leaders and local community organizers to get them to recognize the very volunteering efforts that are put forth by their young people. Sometimes I believe being in Malaysia, all of you are the youth champions. All of you who have the foresight to be here in this auditorium at the summit today have already had that vision to want to give back, to want to grow yourself and develop your capabilities either for your country, for the career, for the business, or for the startup that you're bound to pursue. But one thing I did learn is that when you go for all these projects, it opens up your mind. And it also shows how lucky we are to be Malaysians, how lucky we are to live in a constantly progressive economy. We still have barely 8 more years left before we achieve the developed country status by the year 2020. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of work that needs to be activated on or deriving from the entrepreneurial spirit. Now, lastly, I was also asked, what are the opportunities that I've seen throughout my world expedition? Plenty, but to name a few which really stood out to me personally. Number one would be knowledge exchange. Pretty much, you may think that this is a very common phrase, but believe me, when you go to a foreign country, when you are forced to live with host families, to experience their culture, to experience their food, I'm not sure about you, but personally for me, you're bound to learn so much. You're bound to understand how your comfort zones are constantly tested because you're in an unfamiliar environment. And more importantly, as the entrepreneurial trade, you become adaptable. You have to be adaptable in order to survive. You have to learn a few words of Spanish. You have to walk, you have to trek along the rocky, icy mountains in Canada if you want to really see the true beauties of its nature. You need to be brave, you need to be bold to wander in to the deserts of the safari, not knowing what may lurk around you, to appreciate the golden splendor of its wild environment. Again, this will put you out of your comfort zone, and at the same time, being with the traditional communities, being with our own peers, the youth from Africa, Latin America, Canada, Switzerland, anywhere around the world, there's so much you can learn from each other. There's so much you can share. There's so much perspectives and interpretation that they can tell you regarding on solving a problem. Secondly, I have seen that by helping these many social projects, pretty much it can also be its own social enterprise. I have actually had the chance to work with many NGOs on a global level, asking them how they have sustained themselves, asking them, are they only relying on donation and sponsorship? Many of which it was a surprise to me that they were not merely relying on sponsorship alone. They were charging professional fees. They were actually charging consulting fees and personal development fees for companies to send their employees to volunteer in different projects. And more importantly, they were developing an educational module to actually galvanize the lessons, the many tasks that would actually groom someone to be good in a certain field. Again, volunteering is not only about us giving without receiving anything, though that's good and encouraged. If you want to be a social entrepreneur, or if you have that ambition, perhaps try to think how you can create a sustainable volunteering project, because that has been done all across the world and it is a workable model. Now, lastly, I would say the third biggest lesson or opportunity that I see for us Malaysians would basically be in Latin America and Africa. Pretty much a lot of people in our neighborhoods these days talk about China and India, and no doubt we cannot deny that they're rising to the occasion. But what's more important, we should ask ourselves, are we forgetting our global neighbors in Latin America, from Guatemala, Mexico, to Colombia, Peru, Honduras, to Chile, to Argentina, to Brazil, or jump forward to Africa, from Zimbabwe, to Kenya, to South Africa, to Liberia, to Mozambique? What can we trade with them? What ideas or what products or what services that they may need? When I was in Zimbabwe and Kenya, I can tell you, a budget airline like AirAsia is most likely needed there. Better internet infrastructures like Unified is actually demanded over there. So basically there are a lot of things that we can actually intertwine between these different regions. And more importantly, do you know that Africa and Latin America are still rich with its raw materials? So think about it. Industries that are just waiting for you to explore. Now, just to conclude, the BQE Summit is a great initiative. What started out as a mere Facebook movement, envisioned by Harish, my good friend Sabri Saleh and his team have now materialized into a summit for you. They've managed to unite and galvanize the support from our government agencies like MSC Malaysia to our youth NGOs like My Harapan and the many participating bodies, even Global Entrepreneurship Week, to promote the very essence, the very spirit of entrepreneurship among Malaysian youths. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, you have mentors, you have self-driven young people sitting all around you. The challenge now is up to you. Are you willing to use this opportunity to think about ideas, to get your ideas critiqued, to get your ideas formulated, and then form groups, and then gain advice, form good ties with fellow mentors, and then launch your projects? This is a challenge. With me, I'm here to give you my promise. I'll be returning to Malaysia, God willing, by the middle of December. I'm reachable through Facebook. I'm pretty sure, Harish, if you could announce to them how they could get in touch with me. I'm also reachable through email, michaelteo87@gmail.com. Now what happened is, I'd like to encourage all of you to connect with me, but at the same time, connect with the people that you're now sitting next to or sitting around with in the summit. Believe me, the BQE Summit can only be as effective as you would want it if you take action. You may have the next few days or the entire day today in the summit to make the best of the opportunity that you paid for or that have been given to you. Go for it. Go out there and change the world. When I first won Your Big Year, who would have thought a young Malaysian from a developing country, who would have thought one of the youngest participants, who would have thought from 45,000 people from 168 countries, a Malaysian could do it? But it's not me alone. I came from the same education system like you. Perhaps the one thing I've been really blessed is to have been surrounded with mentors, with very supportive colleagues like Sabri and Harish and his team, to many of you whom I personally know as well, to have actually helped me develop and groom me to become the person that I am today. It's because I decided to take action. It's because I decided to change. I decided to not be irrelevant to the changing tides. You have a decision to make now. Do it.